Hello there, everyone. Guten Tag, and welcome to this German GCSE and iGCSE video tutorial. In this particular tutorial, we are going to look at the listening exam, and I'm going to take you through a variety of different questions, the most common question types that do come up in the German GCSE or iGCSE listening paper. We're going to look at examples from all of the different exam boards as well. And yeah, we'll cover the main question types across each of the exam boards too. And then I'm going to give you step-by-step formulae or methods for answering each of these question types one by one. So should be very valuable. Let's get into it. So just to introduce myself quickly first, I'm Dhananjay Talwar. I studied French and Italian, modern languages at the University of Cambridge. I graduated from there back in 2015, and I have actually been in the field of education since that time, mostly as a tutor. And I've been a full-time tutor for some 6 years at least now, which has been a great experience. I've learned more than 20 languages myself up to different levels. It's something that I really enjoy. I'm very passionate about learning languages and helping others to learn languages too. I really enjoy helping my students to reach their language learning goals and to get to their target grades in exams like GCSEs or iGCSEs. Out of those 20 languages, I've learned at least 9 of them currently to fluency, one of which is, of course, German, which I did for GCSE myself before then practicing considerably with friends. And overall, I've helped more than 500 different students to achieve or even exceed their own target grade in GCSE or iGCSEs for languages while I've been a full-time tutor. I've taught 8 languages so far to GCSE or iGCSE level, some of those at higher levels as well. And yeah, it's been a very enjoyable journey. So moving on now to the German GCSE and iGCSE exam boards. We're not going to go into more depth on this. This is just a snapshot of the different exam boards for GCSE and iGCSE German. And as I always say, it is good to be aware of which exam board you are following, as there are variations and differences from exam board to exam board. In this particular video, though, this particular tutorial, we are going to go through the most common question types across different exam boards. So they're not specific to just one or two exam boards. I've taken example questions and question types which commonly come up across all of these exam boards. So no matter which exam board you are studying exactly, this should be very useful for you. And speaking of question types, these are the particular question types that we're going to explore and look at in more detail. So they include gap fill questions, matching up questions, multiple choice type questions, questions where you have to identify the correct statements, questions where you need to answer in English, and questions where you have to answer in German. In brackets, I've also put the dictation task, which is part of the new German GCSE for 2 particular exam boards, AQA and Pearson EdXL GCSE, for exams from 2026 onwards. But that's not covered in this video because there is a different video specifically on the dictation task. We're going to look at every single one of these question types mentioned just above the dictation task, and I'm going to take you through them one by one using particular examples as well. There is considerable overlap or similarities in the question types between the listening exam and reading exam as well. If you're familiar with the question types there in the reading exam, that should really help you. Okay, so we're going to kick off by looking at gap fill questions. This particular example comes from a Pearson EdXL iGCSE paper from 2024. So you can see, the question itself written out. This is a screenshot of the actual question itself. What I mean by gap fill questions are basically questions where you're given a selection of words. Those are the words here in this box from A to M, and then a series of statements. The statements are here from A to F at the bottom, and you have to choose which word can go into the gap to complete each statement. Of course, there's only going to be one right answer for every single statement. And students have various techniques for approaching these gap fill questions. I have a particular technique that I believe can work very well and that I would highly recommend. and that is to use the grammar first to help you. Yeah, so of course, I would first always take a little bit of time to read over the question and the instructions. It's vital to understand the instructions clearly too. Then I would go through every single word in this box from A to M and just try and make sure that you understand each of them, because that obviously really helps. And then I would read through each of the statements. Then I would go about trying to put the correct words into the correct statements. So it is important to take your time and read over everything, as long as you're not running out of time in the actual test. But once you've done all of that, I would go to the grammar first to help you identify which words fit into which gaps. If we look at 6b here, as an example, it says Sport als Hobby hat something Nachteile, meaning sport as a hobby has something disadvantages. And we obviously have to fill in that gap. If you use the grammar, that can really help because it can narrow down the options immediately. For example, you can see that the word that goes in the gap in sentence B, that has to agree with Nachteile. It's going to be likely an adjective that agrees with Nachteile. That is, Nachteile is in the plural. And therefore, out of all of the options, if you scan all the options, there are only two that could potentially fit those rules or those requirements, which are D, einige, or I, keine. Yeah, and then you can, of course, listen out, make sure to listen out carefully, and listen out for the detail in the audio, and that should tell you which of those two options is correct. But using the grammar to narrow down the options to choose from, often you can narrow it down all the way to just two options, like we did just there, can be extremely helpful. Yeah, after narrowing down the options, of course, you need to listen out to the audio to decide which of those two options is correct. But the trick is certainly to use the grammar to help you first of all. Watch out for trick questions as well and pay attention to the details. That's quite common for all of these questions. They will often try and trick you by mentioning, by seeming to mention one of the answers only to then backtrack and mention something else, or say something that rules out what they had initially said. So do watch out for that and be careful not to write down the first thing you hear. Okay, this is just to show you that for 6b here, D or I would be the potential options. And of course, the exact answer would depend on the material in the audio. Okay, the next type of question is matching up questions. This comes from Pearson and Excel, their 2020 paper. And yeah, you can see that the question here is about Schulfächer, so school subjects. And yeah, Christoph is speaking about school. And you've got to choose between four options which are all different subjects: chemistry, English, history, or maths. And of course, you have to match them up and put them into the right gap. So that's why these are obviously called match-up questions. You'll often come across match-up questions with names instead. So you might have a series of sentences, and then you get a series of 4 or 5 different names as well, like Christoph, I don't know, Laura, and Johann, and some other German-sounding names. And then you simply have to match up which name goes into which gap. That's quite a common type of matching up question, but that's not the only type. And of course, for these, you've got to match up which of the subjects corresponds with which sentence or which gap. It is very important, as always, to read over the instructions first. They often contain useful information for how to answer the question. And it does say, for instance, here, du darfst jedes Wort mehr als einmal benutzen. You can use each word more than once, which is very important because obviously we've got 4 options and five gaps to complete, or five sentences to fill. I would, in terms of exam technique, I would be careful to listen out for the details. The most common mistake for these matching up type questions is that students will just write down the first thing that they hear or the first thing that appears to potentially be the right answer. But you've got to watch out because they will often try and trick you, particularly towards the end of the exam papers. For example, if we look at 2a, which says, Christoph hat eine neue Lehrerin für, meaning Christoph has a new teacher or female teacher for, and then of course we have to complete the sentence with one of the subject options. Often in the audio, they may say something like, Christoph's chemistry teacher joined just last year. And many students, as soon as they hear that, would think, okay, chemistry is definitely the right answer. And they would write chemie or chemistry in as the answer for 2A. But then later on in the audio, they may well add some other information. For example, they might say that Christoph's English teacher joined last week, which would actually indicate that the second one, English, is a better answer for question 2A. So don't write down the first thing that you hear. Do try and take your time to listen to all of the information and detail. Okay, so now we move on to multiple choice questions. Multiple choice questions are extremely common, perhaps the single most common question type for listening and even for reading exams. And this is taken from the 2023 paper for AQA. So yeah, you can see that they will always write out clear instructions at the top. Multiple choice questions are nice in the sense that you've got a limited number of options to choose from. So here we've got 3 options to choose from for every single question. And the topic for this question is, of course, food, Essen. And you just have to select which one is correct out of those 3. The number of options for these multiple choice questions can vary. Often it is 3, but not necessarily always. And yeah, usually you will have to select simply one correct answer out of the number of options available. So the first thing to do for these, as always, is to read over the question, make sure you understand all instructions. Then what I would do before the audio has even started, ideally, is to read through all of the questions and options as much as you can. Read through, for example, Fleisch, meat, Gemüse, vegetables, Obst, fruit, and make sure that you understand all of those, because that can really help. And that means that you know what to listen out for once the audio does begin. So that makes it quite a bit easier. The key technique, the main thing to do for these multiple choice type questions, apart from reading through the question and options all very carefully, is to use elimination. So many students, particularly just after hearing the audio the first time, will not be able to identify exactly what the right answer is, but they may well be able to rule out incorrect answers. For example, for 26.1, if you hear Natasha say something about, if you're not sure what the correct answer is, but you've definitely heard something about how Natasha hates eating meat, then you'd know that the answer cannot be A, Fleisch or meat. 26.1, by the way, is asking, what does Natasha like to eat? Was isst Natasha gern? What does she like eating? So if she says that she hates eating meat, then you can effectively rule out A, which means that the correct answer is either B or C. And even just using that elimination tactic, it narrows down your options and it gets you closer to the correct answer. So that can work very well too. Essentially, for any question type where you've got a limited number of options to choose from, elimination can be really useful as well. And that likely takes practice for most students too. Okay, so that was multiple choice questions. Now we move on to questions where you've got to identify the correct statements. This comes from a sample paper for Cambridge iGCSE. So for just to take you through the instructions, it says here that both Bettina and Max are going to talk about their city called Birkenheide. And for every question, you have to tick the 2 correct boxes from A to E. So this is the first of those questions. For each of these identify the correct statement style questions, you will of course be presented with a certain number of statements. Here they are from A to E, and you will always have to select a certain number of them which are correct according to the information provided in the audio. Here you have to tick 2 correct statements out of 5, but be aware that those numbers can vary. You might have to select 3 correct statements or more, and you may be presented with more than 5 statements as well, or a different number of statements. So the first thing to do is definitely read over the instructions. make sure you're clear on what you have to do. Watch out for the details, like how many boxes you have to select as correct. Yeah, uh, and how many statements there are. And the next thing I would do is read through each of those statements and make sure that you understand them as clearly as possible. Ideally, again, I would do that before the audio has even started for that particular question. That gives you a head start and an idea of what to listen out for as well. As with all question types, you've got to be really careful about tricks. Yeah, they will often try and mislead the students. Yeah, for example, 35A says that a company is planning to build or construct 200 new houses. You may well hear something that sounds similar in the actual audio, but they may say something like 2,000 houses or 300 houses instead of 200. And those details can make all the difference, of course. So watch out for those details or listen out for those details too. Again, you can use elimination here to rule out wrong answers because we have a limited number of options to choose from. So if you're not sure, if you're not sure what the correct answer is, even then you can, for example, rule out statements that you know to be incorrect. For example, if you know that Max said that Birkenheide has plenty of parking, then you know that 35E, statement E, is incorrect. And that can help you to identify the two correct statements as well. It can narrow down the options. And of course, because we've got certain statements to choose between, make sure to take a bit of time to read through them as fully as you can and try and understand the statements, before the full question has even started. Okay, the next type of question, our penultimate type, is where you've got to answer in English. This is from the 2024 paper for AQA, and the instructions, clearly written in English here, tell us that it's about, Zoe's talking to Ahmed about a recent trip to the cinema. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that they should always state very clearly which language you've got to answer the question in, whether it's English or German. Questions where you have to answer in English are more and more common now, and questions where you have to answer in German appear less so, but both of them can currently still come up. If you're in any doubt whatsoever, then you'd always answer in the same language that the question itself is written in. Here the questions are written in English. That's a big clue or a giveaway that you'd answer in English, but they should state it clearly in the paper as well. And for these questions, it generally comes down to where you've got to answer in English. It generally comes down to identifying where the correct part of the audio is, or where the correct words or section of the audio lies, and then translating that section into English, from German into English, as the audio would, of course, be in German. So the first thing to do is to identify where the answer is in the audio, and then to translate that into English. For these questions where you've got to answer in either English or in German, you generally are not required to use full sentences at all. Again, they should specify in the exam paper, but the rule is that you do not have to, unless otherwise specified, really. They wouldn't expect full sentences. And so you shouldn't be writing huge amounts of information or long sentences at all for these types of questions. Usually individual words or phrases can even be enough. And they tend to be a bit more lenient for these harder questions as well, where you've got to provide answers in English or German. So it really comes down to identifying the key ideas to convey. But make sure to read the instructions, make sure to read each question one by one as well. Also make a note of how many marks are available per question, because that gives you a great clue as to how many details you have to provide to get those marks. The second question here is worth 2 marks because you have to give 2 details, for example. And give only as much detail and information as is required. If, for example, 23.1 is a 1-mark question, I would not give more than 1 detail for that question, because if you add additional details but they happen to be incorrect, then you do risk losing the marks. Even if you can't hedge your bets by say giving 3 pieces of information for the first question, just hoping that one of those 3 is correct. because you may well end up being penalized if the other two are wrong. Okay, that's answering in English. And the final type of question is where you've got to answer in German. This one comes from a Pearson edXL iGCSE paper from 2020. This one is about diet. So in this particular question, you simply have to fill in the table effectively, or complete complete each of these statements from A to F with a word or a phrase in German. Whenever you've got to answer in German, try and use the audio to help you as much as possible. As with the questions where you've got to answer in English, the answers should not be very substantial. It should be a word or a phrase here or there, but but make sure to use the audio as much as you can. So try and identify where the correct answer lies in the audio, and then it comes down to essentially transcribing that part of the audio. Sometimes you may have to change individual words or verb endings. For example, in this kind of audio, Sonia would often talk in the first person. She might say something like, I don't like eating vegetables. And instead of writing, well, in this case, you would only have to write one word, actually, vegetables or Gemüse. But if she says, I don't like eating vegetables, please don't write, I don't like eating vegetables. You'd, of course, have to change that to she doesn't like eating vegetables. So be aware that you may need to make those kinds of changes. Although for this particular example, one word is often going to be enough per answer. Okay, now there's just about time for a quick quiz to test your understanding of the different types of questions that can come up in a German or iGCSE listening exam, GCSE or iGCSE listening. So, question number one, what is the technique of elimination? Definitely something I did mention a few times. Let me give you a little bit of time to think. Okay, I'm going to reveal the answer to this now. So elimination is basically eliminating answers which are definitely incorrect. So if you're given different options to choose from, even if you're not sure what the correct answer is, you can rule out answers that you know are not correct. And this can, of course, be really useful to get you closer to the right answer. For any multiple choice type question in particular, even for any question in general, I would always have a go. I'd always try it and have a guess. If you don't have a guess, there's no chance of getting it correct. Particularly if it's a multiple choice question, there can be some chance, a decent chance of even guessing the right answer as well. Question 2 is true or false. You'll hear every question in the listening exam exactly twice. Okay, let me reveal the answer for that now as well. This is true. The exception for this is the dictation section, which is new for exams from 2026 onwards. And that's only for two exam boards again, AQA and Pearson edXL GCSE. That's everything in the dictation section you'd hear 3 times. But otherwise, you'd hear every question, every audio within the listening exam exactly twice. So it's very good to be aware of that and to then, come up with techniques and strategies to use that to your advantage too. Number 3, true or false again. You should always answer the questions in the listening exam in German. So do you have to always answer in German? Think through this for a few seconds before I reveal the answer. Okay, let me reveal the answer then. This one is false. So as mentioned, if the question requires the student to write an answer, you should answer in the same language that the question is written in. The instructions in the paper should tell you which language to answer in, of course. But if you're in any doubt, you can definitely follow this rule. You always answer in the same language that the question itself is written in. And question number 4, how could you use grammar to help you if you're answering gap fill type questions? Try and think back to gap fill questions, which was the first one that we looked at, and try to remember how grammar could help you. Okay, let me reveal the answer for this one too. So grammar can often or usually help to eliminate options that would not grammatically fit in the gap. This can really narrow down the options to help to choose the correct answer. Often you can eliminate everything except two answers, but it does depend on the question. This doesn't work equally well for all gap fill type questions. For some of them, you can narrow down the options hugely. For others, the grammar might not be as useful for those gap fill type questions. Okay. If you have questions about any of the information here at all, or if you'd like to know about more personalized help, which I do provide too, and lessons, that you can get in touch via email, through Facebook, or Instagram. These are my contact details again. I am present on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, where I post every day, more or less, about my love of languages, trying to inspire and motivate more and more people to learn languages, making sure that they know the benefits of doing so, and also trying to give them efficient and fun techniques and ways to do that as well. And I do post a lot about GCSE and iGCSE too, including exam technique, how to prepare for exams, how to go in making sure you're feeling as confident as possible, and more. So don't hesitate to follow me on each of those platforms. I do have free resources available too. These are just some examples. I do have ones for German and other languages too, as well as generic ones for GCSE and iGCSE. So if you'd like to access any of those very useful resources for free, then don't hesitate to get in touch. And yeah, I do one-to-one classes, group classes, and more for German and for other subjects. So don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested in any of that.